Months after a deadly shooting in New Zealand, several social media outlets are forming a coalition to confront violent and extremist online content. The collaborative effort will be an expansion of the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, which was created in 2017 to combat extremist propaganda by ISIS.
Here to discuss those plans and the possible impact are two former extremists. Mubin Sheikh, former jihadi sympathizer turned national security and counterterrorism expert, and former white supremacy leader, now anti-hate activist, Arno Michaelis. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thanks for coming on.
Sagar.
Arno, nice to see you in person. What are you in town for? What are you working on?
Mubin and I are with a group called Parents for Peace that we do our intervention work with, and this is Parents for Peace annual gathering. We met with Congressman Keating in his office in the Hill yesterday, as well as did a talk at the Belgian embassy. And we're basically talking about the need to treat violent extremism as a public health issue, which is something we're advocating for.
Well, Mubin, talk a little bit about that. Why is it a public health issue?
Yeah, if you just securitize it, then you only bring to bear on the problem a very small number and type of expertise. What you need to bring to bear on this is something that covers the spectrum, whether it's mental health, whether it's religious aspects, whether it's psychosocial aspects, whether it's just, sometimes they need a mentor, they need, some kind of support. And not just the kids who are getting caught up in this, but the parents as well. And this is something that gets lost on a lot of people is, the parents that are left to have to deal with their kids being arrested. They had no idea. The FBI have broken through their door basically to get their kid out. So it's really, this is why it has to be a public health issue, is to cover all the bases across the board.
Arno, what do you say to people, though, who say you're making excuses for these people?
Well, if somebody develops lung cancer from smoking, do we just turn our back on them and lock them in jail and say, well, they gave it to themselves? I really believe that adherence to violent extremist ideologies is an addiction. And that doesn't necessarily make the person stricken with this addiction blameless, but it does mean that they need help more than punishment. I believe hurt people hurt people. And the reason why people are attracted to violent extremism in the first place is because they're suffering. So what sense does it make to make them suffer more, thinking that that's going to make them any less violent or any less extreme?
So right now we're in a big discussion about social media companies, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Mubin, how have these companies taken a responsible role in cracking down on this or helping to fight these organizations? What do you think?
Well, social media companies, I have a love-hate relationship with them in this sense, because I was, I saw the rise of ISIS in real time in 2012, really, but 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 were really the heydays. And in 2012, 2013, and the subsequent years, social media companies were doing nothing about it. If anything, I can say that some social media companies pretty much aided and abetted ISIS recruitment and radicalization. Now that they realize that, well, wait a second, we have a problem, we need to do something about it, I am, positive, about what they're doing, and they realize that there is a problem, and they realize that they need to deal with the problem. And so that's at least a good first and second step. But we're really just at the beginning of this, and who knows which way it's going to go.
Were you both essentially radicalized online? Was that an important part of your radicalization?
I was pre-internet. I was a leader of white nationalist hate groups from 1987 to 94. So I was radicalized by a cassette tape of a skinhead band.
Wow.
But seeing that stark difference between the pre-internet and post-internet days is quite a bit. The internet, as well as social media, has made recruitment into all sorts of violent extremist ideologies exponentially a broader reach. But at the same time, I look at it as an opportunity in that we have exponentially more voice to push back against the forces of hate, and you got to do that by using love.
Well, it's interesting. I know I've spoken with you both about this. What do you both think about deplatforming? So there's a big debate in this country, which is if you hold these white supremacist views, just sweep them offline. People say that just drives them into further deep corners of the internet, and that by doing that you actually would breed even more hate. Would love to hear both of your takes on that. What do you think, Arno?
I am a huge fan of the First Amendment. And I see the First Amendment as one of responsibility on the shoulders of citizens
Yes.
to be mindful of their speech, because the government isn't going to tell us what we can and can't say. I don't see the First Amendment as licensed to just say whatever offensive things you like. I think that's a very disdainful way to interpret the First Amendment. So that being said, I don't believe deplatforming works. I know that all violent extremism ideologies are rooted in victimhood.
Yes.
And when you deplatform someone, you're feeding that victimhood narrative. So I think anytime there's people espousing hateful rhetoric into society, we got to see that as an opportunity to espouse, to dictate the rules of engagement, and say, hey, this is about our common humanity and what we have in common, and also the power of diversity and the beauty of multiculturalism, and make a point about what you're for rather than what you're against.
Yeah. What do you think, Mubin?
I think there's a limited value to deplatforming. I mean, in some cases it has worked. I mean, with some ISIS accounts that were very active early on, they would get deleted and they would just come back and they would actually put on the thing, 39th account, may the kuffar die in their rage. Right? But after 48 and 64, people get bored. Like they're not gonna look for you anymore, and so you lose your influence. Or some other far-right agitators who have been deplatformed, complaining about they're broke, we have no this, we have no that. So in some cases it does work. But I want to come back to the ISIS years that I was very involved, and I mean, they were online everywhere.
Right.
And everyone was like, how can these people operate like just so blatantly? But the flip side was, well, that's because the national security agencies were watching all these accounts and keeping track of them and seeing who they're getting in contact with, and then mapping the entire network.
So it was a tool as well.
That's right. So it became a tool of surveillance.
Please.
I'd add to that, and I do agree with Mubin that there are times where deplatforming is appropriate, and essentially an example of this is Alex Jones. I mean, this is somebody, deplatforming doesn't necessarily have to mean just giving someone or allowing someone carte blanche to make money with a very hateful message. YouTube is a private company. So this isn't a matter of First Amendment. This is a matter of a company saying this violates our platform, it violates our terms and conditions. And when you have someone who is making millions of dollars on very toxic, harmful content, denying that Sandy Hook happened, things like that, I have no problem with pulling the plug on that.
Yeah. Mubin, do you think that there's been a nervousness among social media companies in really cracking down hard on white nationalist extremism because there's a sort of bleed over into the mainstream right?
Yeah, there is. I mean, obviously for them, it's a consumer-based product, right? Like you need people on those platforms, and if you're sending the message to the public that we're watching the platforms, we're giving up your information to the government, this and that, anything that indicates any kind of censorship, your people are going to leave your platform. So I think that's where their nervousness comes from. It's just a business decision as far as they're concerned.
I think you're right. Well, thank you so much to you both for coming here, for the work that you guys are doing. Thank you guys.
Parents for Peace.
We really appreciate it.
Parents4peace.org.
There you go.
People check it out.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
Coming up on Rising, at least half of all Americans think U.S. institutions behave unethically. What does that mean for the state of our democracy? Nothing good, I'm sure.
2020 news. Two candidates are going to make Hail Mary fundraising passes. Is it going to work? Team Rising is going to weigh in next.